this video I finally get to talk about my favorite series of John Deere tractors, and that's the 30 series. The 30 series actually came out initially at about 1971. John Deere had in the mid-60s opened some plants in Mannheim, Germany, so they had these utility tractors. They were originally like the 1020, 2020s, etc. And then around 1971, Mannheim was making the same tractors pretty much, but they were the 1530, 830, etc. But that's not really what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is the Sound Idea tractors, and there were 4 of those introduced in 1972 by John Deere, and they became the baseline, the benchmark for John Deere tractors in my mind going forward. The 4430 sold in 1975, I think 14,000 units, which was more than double than any other of the Sound Idea tractors that John Deere had put out in 1972. So just the popularity of the 4430 was unmatched by any tractors John Deere sold. Prior to that was obviously the John Deere A was the big one, and then in 1960 the 4010, and then in 1964 the 4020, and the 4430, well actually the 4030, 4230, 4430, 4630 all came out at the same time in 1972, and the response was equal to what it was in 1960. It was just enormous response. It was such a great tractor. One thing John Deere didn't anticipate when they came out with the new generation tractors in 1960 was the amount of people who wanted a cab for their tractor. And one thing that came about during the 1960s is a lot of third-party manufacturers were building cabs like Sims, and I can't remember the name of the one on my brother-in-law's tractor. Year round, it's like year round. There might have been some others too, but those are the 2. Regardless, John Deere realized that there was a demand and a want for an enclosed cab, and so that was answered with the new generation tractors, and Sound Idea is what they call them. They had a sound guard cab, and so it was pressurized. It could had heat, air conditioning, 2 windshield wipers. The glass was polarized and tinted. Cassette deck, actually probably 8-track. One thing and they had a Frigidaire air conditioner in them. And one thing that's kind of funny is the people who bought these tractors, they started complaining about the ride being rough, and John Deere couldn't figure it out because they had increased the quality of their seats and suspension and everything. But what had happened is they had made these tractors so quiet that the senses, your sensory organs, stopped worrying about the sound, and then they were worried about what the comfort level was. So they were realizing the ride was bumpy instead of just loud. So John Deere scratched their head for quite a while before they realized it, and then they made some adjustments. And what was funny is one of the adjustments they did is they actually made the cab louder. So it was louder inside, and then the complaints went away. And it's kind of a funny way to deal with a problem, but it worked. And so anyway, but this sound Idea was basically the concept of a cab that was using a sound guard body, but the idea was the concept that it was all enclosed, pressurized, and it was its own like little pod, so to speak. And it's really a great tractor, and I really like them a lot. We had one on my sister's dairy farm when I was a kid, and they had a 4430. So one thing the tractors these came out with, they could have had the sound guard body. They could have had just the 4-post. It's like they called it a roll. I don't remember what they called it now. It wasn't roll guard cab, I think was what it was. Yeah, roll guard cab. So it didn't have the glass, but it was basically, it looked just like this. And so I know some people who have those. But anyway, the one on my sister's farm, it didn't originally come with a cab on it, and you could still buy them without the cab. So it didn't come with one. It just had the old style, 4020 ROPS with the yellow thing on. It's just a holdover from the 60s, so it wasn't quite like this, but it was close. But this was it was quite the tractor when it came out, and so they came out with those 4 tractors. Originally they were just 4-wheel drive, but then they added a 4-wheel drive, or it's not a 4-wheel drive, a 4-wheel drive tractor This is a four-wheel drive tractor, and so when you talk about tractors, you say four-wheel drive, you're talking about articulated big tractors. These are still two-wheel drive tractors with front-wheel assist. So there's a lot of confusion sometimes. They say, this many two-wheel drive tractors were sold, or this many four-wheel drive tractors were sold. Well, when you're talking four-wheel drive, you're talking about the big tractor. This is just a two-wheel drive tractor with front-wheel assist on it. So one thing I have to mention it is in 1973. John Deere came out with a little skid steer, and these had a little Wisconsin Robin motor in them. And these are really tiny little guys, but very handy. They were great in the barn for feed and cleaning out barns. So I have to kind of give it honorable mention because it came out at the same time. In 1975, John Deere came out with a 175 horsepower 8430, and this one's missing the back fenders. It's been gone for a long time, and I couldn't tell you where they went. But the 175 horsepower 8430 that had the SoundGuard cab on it, and John Deere loves to omit the U in the word guard. They have it high guard, and it's in everything they sell pretty much, the word guard without the U, and so they trademarked that, just as a little side note. But the 175 horsepower 8430 and the 225 horsepower 8630. And John Deere had a whole industrial line too, so I'm not going to get into that today. I'm just going to talk about the agricultural tractors, primarily the four big tractors that came out in 1972, because that's what it's all about. And they also had a couple, when I say a couple, not very many. They did make some high crop models and some specialty versions of those tractors, but primarily they were a row crop tractor. And the configuration was this right here, not the front wheel assist, but two-wheel drive, and you could put duals on them, and there was just a ton of these made, and great tractor. These tractors were available with the proven synchro range, the quad range, which was 16 gears, so just a 16 speed, high-low, no clutch, and the three smaller tractors, you could still get the power shift, which was available before. And what happened in 1973 was one of the very few times in history where the farmers were actually making a couple bucks and they had money in their pockets. So they were buying new tractors, new combines, and everything. And John Deere couldn't keep up with demand, so they added onto their plant for one of the several times that John Deere's added onto their plant. But they increased production by tenfold. It seems like they just kept building more tractors and people kept buying them. And you see a lot of those tractors on farms today. And that SoundGuard body stayed on tractors well into the 1990s. Now you could still get a Roll-O-Matic on the small tractor, the 4030. You could still get a Roll-O-Matic front end, and they didn't sell very many because the heyday of the narrow front end had sunset by then. It was a sunset idea, and they still sold a few. And if you look around, you go on Google that series tractors with a narrow front end, you'll find a couple, and there's actually a couple with the cab on them, and they look ridiculous to me, but whatever. That's what they had them. Appreciate you watching. If you haven't already, please take a moment, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you leave some comments down below so I can see what you think about these tractors. Thanks for watching, and off to the videos.